Hey everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault, and once again I'm coming to you with another From the Vault video. Now normally when I do these videos I'm showing off a particular firearm from my personal collection. However, today's firearm is not owned by me, it is owned by my friend Jack. Yeah, Jack has lent me another awesome firearm. He did lend this to me because he wanted me to do a range report, but I was unable to do so, and I'll explain why in just a few minutes. But let's show you the gun that I want to talk about today and show off. This is the Sig Sauer P220. It's an early example with the folded sheet metal slide, the heel magazine release. But what makes this so special is the fact this particular variant is in 38 Super. Yeah, it's really hard to find one of these. Now, it's not impossible. You can go online and find them. However, collectors really seek these because they are so scarce. So to have one here on the table was kind of neat. And I wanted to compare and contrast it to a couple of other Sig P220s that I personally own from various eras. And I will do that when I adjust the camera. But let's talk about why I couldn't do a range report on this particular pistol. And so the issue I was having was the fact that I could not get ammunition to cycle through this particular firearm. Because I said this gun is chambered in 38 Super, Jack did provide me with some ammunition because I don't own any other guns in 38 Super. In fact, this is the very first firearm I've ever fired in this caliber, and he provided this, some PMC 38 Super plus P. Now I was having some weak ejections, and then occasionally the gun would not pick up the next round out of the magazine. So I was thinking, because these magazines are kind of old, it is my understanding that this gun was discontinued in this caliber somewhere in like the early 90s. So these magazines are probably pretty old, and I was thinking to myself, well, it probably has a weak spring in it. So Jack actually went out and bought a few other magazines that he found, I believe, at Gun Mag Warehouse. As I said, all of these have to be used. They might even be police trade-ins. So I was like, okay, so if it's a magazine issue here, these are gonna work great. I went back to the range and I had the same issue, which tells me it's not the magazine. But I did capture some of this on film. So I'm going to show you the issues I was having at the range, then we'll talk more about this gun, more about the caliber, and I'll compare it to those other SIGs. And as you can see, it just wasn't reliable enough for me to do an honest range report on it. I would be dealing with all of those missteps with this gun, all those malfunctions. So I was like, well, what can I do with this? Before I return it to Jack and have him figure out what he wants to do with this particular gun, I wanted to do a From the Vault because it is so cool and so rare to have a gun like this on the table. Now, I did a little bit of research into 38 Super. Now, this is the first gun I've ever fired in this caliber, and I believe Jack said he had never fired this caliber either. So he bought this PMC 38 Super plus P. Now it appears that the plus P actually doesn't mean that there is 38 Super and 38 Super plus P. A lot of the manufacturers now take and add the plus P to the box because they want to distinguish it between the old 38 ACP, which is this particular cartridge's parent case. 38 Super came around in the 1930s to defeat lightly armored vehicles. Yeah, I guess it was during the gangster era. 45 ACP just wasn't doing it. But once 357 Magnum came out, this cartridge kind of became obsolete. It was still used in competition shooting and in 1911s and in some civilian applications, but law enforcement tended to go away from this. And I think that's why most people today know this caliber in the world of competition shooting in 1911s, and it's also used around the world in countries like Mexico, where civilians are not allowed to own calibers that are military or law enforcement. So having .38 Super is a big advantage in countries like that. So that's where this cartridge kind of has found its niche in the modern world. Now, that being said, when I was firing this particular gun, it definitely felt underpowered, and you could tell from those weak ejections. So I don't know. I've had some issues with some PMC ammo in the past being underpowered, so that might be the complete issue with this. But because I don't have any other ammunition and nothing else that I can test, I wanted to show off this gun here on the channel before returning it to Jack, because the gun is in fantastic condition, but there are a few things that I have noted about it. First off, this gun was made later than I was expecting. I checked the serial number and the proof marks. This gun was made in 1987. It was imported to the US by Sig Arms. I believe it says here in Tyson's Corner, Virginia. So that's one of the early places that Sig operated here in the US. So I actually thought this one was made a lot earlier because of the Heel magazine release, but it was made in 1987. So let me adjust the camera, and I want to show you guys a couple things. Number one, about .38 Super, compare it to 9mm and kind of show you the dimensions if you're not familiar with this cartridge. Then I want to show you and compare it with the other SIGs that I own and talk about its features. So let me adjust the camera now, and let's do that. So here are the three Sig P220s that I wanted to talk about today and compare and contrast, and here is Jack's in .38 Super here on the bottom. But before we do that, I wanted to show the difference between .38 Super and 9mm. As you can see, .38 Super is a longer case. And when I looked up the dimensions of the projectile, the .38 Super is .356, with a 9mm is .355. Yeah, they're very similar, but .38 Super is just a little bit bigger. And as I mentioned, this uses the .38 ACP as its parent case. It is semi-rimmed, so when you run your finger along the case, you can feel that that rim sticks out just a little bit, where a 9mm is rimless. Now that always confused me, because like, well, of course it has a rim, it's right there. It just means that the rim itself sticks out or doesn't stick out. So the rim, or the edge of the rim, is supposed to be parallel or even with the outer diameter of the case. That means it is rimless, where this one is semi-rimmed, where it comes out just a little bit. And that is because the .38 ACP was originally designed to be fired in the M1900 Colts, designed by John Browning, and the way he designed the barrel, they needed a little bit of support for the chambering of the .38 ACP, and that's why it is semi-rimmed, and it just kind of extended into the .38 Super. So when they design the barrels, they have to be cut just a little bit different. So that's the difference between those two calibers. I found that to be quite fascinating. So let's talk about these three guns. Now, the earliest example that I have here on the table is this particular one, chambered in .45. This one was made in 1978. And it was imported by Haas Firearms Company. And this is the era when most of the 220s being brought into the US were being brought in by Browning Arms. And those are called the Browning BDA, or the Browning Double Actions. Now this one is more of an authentic one from West Germany. The material that the slide is made of, I guess, is still that high carbon steel. The bluing isn't exactly a black finish. It has a little bit of a purplish shade to it, and that just could be because of the age. It does have the Heel magazine release, and it does have the lanyard loop, which you'll find on most of the military and the police versions of this particular firearm. The other example that I have is from the mid-90s, and this is from a police contract that I believe that was canceled. This one's also chambered in .45, and as you see here, it does have more of the typical US magazine release with the button on the side. Another difference between an early production and kind of a later production of these stamped sheet metal versions is, you can see the grips, of course, are different. The textures are different, and obviously they have to be designed a little bit different because one has that button, but the textures are very very different. So now let's take a look at the one in 38 Super. Now, just handling it here on the workbench, I don't feel like this one is as finely polished and as finely made. I can tell from the finish that's on the slide and the frame, it's a little bit rougher. I would say it's more of a matte finish. I can see more machine marks on the receiver than I can on the other particular examples. The grip material, while it looks very similar to the earlier example, the plastic on this one seems to be a little bit cheaper. It doesn't seem to be as sturdy. It definitely has a different feel and a different sound. Now, let me safety check this gun real fast. We are clear. And let me tell you, when I kind of feel this trigger, it feels a little bit more plasticky. It doesn't feel as solid, and you can probably even hear that on the microphone, as the older example. This one feels more metal, it feels more solid, what I would normally associate with a modern Sig today. I also noticed that this one does have the cutout in the grips for the lanyard loop. However, it doesn't have the lanyard loop. So there's the one with the lanyard loop. This one does not have that, but it does have the cutout in the grip. And that could be because this one was designed for the civilian market. Obviously, the one with the lanyard loop was for military and police. Why that makes such a big difference, I have no idea. You'd have to ask the Germans. But yeah, this one does not have the lanyard loop, but it does have the cutout for it. And then if I compare it to a more modern one, I have to say, once again, the grips are definitely different. This one feels lighter here in my hand. I don't actually have a scale out here in the garage to compare, but this one feels a little bit lighter. You can also tell there's a difference in the older style hammer, which this one has a more pointed hammer, and this is more of a modern style hammer, which is this one's a little bit more round, and that spur isn't as sharp, so you have more gripping surface if you are going to cock that hammer manually. So that's just a few of the differences. And to kind of give you an idea once again about the production date of these, this is about 1978, 1977. This one is 87, and this one is about 1996. And just after this, they went to making the SIGs out of bar stock steel in the slide instead of using the stamped sheet metal. Now on this 38 Super one, I can actually see the end, or where they welded that end part to the slide, because as I said, these are made of stamped sheet metal. And of course, they're rolled around some type of block, and then this part up here is actually machined and welded on. And I don't know if it's gonna come across on the camera, but I can actually see a finish difference and maybe a little bit of a machine line where whoever put on that nose part added it. So yeah, you can see that. It just kind of seems like maybe in the 1980s, Sig kind of slacked off just a little bit in their quality control, but that does not detract away from the coolness or the quality of the gun. I think that they were probably just churning these things out as fast as they possibly could, and maybe they were just not concerned with the looks and the cosmetics as they were in the earlier and later years. But I think the gun is of the same quality. The only thing I think we really need to get is some other ammunition and see if it will work in this. But I just wanted to take a little bit of time, show this off today, because this is such a cool and rare variant of the P220, chambered in 38 Super. And I know these magazines are super hard to come by, and Jack was able to pick up 3 of them. Yeah, nobody makes these in aftermarket. So just wanted to show this off, compare and contrast it. If you like SIGs and the Sig P220, this is a really cool variant to have if you're a collector. And once again, there's the differences between those. So just wanted to show it off. Unfortunately, I was not able to get it to run, so I couldn't do a range report on it. But I did want to show it off here on a From the Vault video. So thank you so much, Jack, for lending it to the channel. I'll get this back to you all cleaned up, and you can decide what you want to do with it. But it's definitely a collector's piece. It's definitely interesting. And I know there's a lot of SIG collectors out there that will drool over this. All right, so let me know what you think in the comments section below. And do you guys think 38 Super is a neat caliber? And do you own any guns in 38 Super? I would love to know. So, as always, thanks for watching.